Hello everyone. On this video we will be solving some word problems that involves quadratic equations. Alright, so let's jump right to our first example. Okay, so for example, for the function f of x equals 18x squared plus 15x minus 10, use f of x equals 15 to find 2 points that lie on the graph of the function. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at the fact that f of x is equal to 15. Since f of x is equal to 15, we just replace the f of x here with 15. So replace f of x with 15 and put into standard form. Okay, so once we do that, it should make a little more sense. Okay, so we have 18x squared plus 15x minus 10 equals f of x. So 18x squared plus 15x minus 10 equals f of x. I just kind of switch those around to put the f of x on this side. So if we replace that with 15, we'd end up with 18x squared plus 15x minus 10 equals 15. So if we subtract 15 from both sides, those two cancel out. So we end up with 18x squared plus 15x minus 10, and minus 15 gives us minus 25 equals 0. Alright. So now we just have to solve this one. Unfortunately, because our values do not have a common factor, we have to use the A times C method with these pretty decent sized numbers. Okay, but it's possible. So we'll let A equal 18. We know that B is equal to 15. And C is equal to negative 25. Okay, so the A times C method means first we have to find A times C, which is 18 times negative 25. Which equals negative 450. So that means we have to find two numbers that multiply to equal negative 450. And those same two numbers add to equal your B, which is 15. Alright, so in this case, and you'll probably find it after trial and error, you'll see 30 times negative 15 works for both of them. 30 and negative 15. 30 times negative 15 is negative 450, and 30 plus negative 15 is positive 15. Okay. So remember the A times C method, we're going to replace the middle term, so 15x, with 30x minus 15x. Alright, so once we do that, this equation will become 18x squared instead of 15x, will be plus 30x minus 15x minus 25 equals 0. Okay, so now we factor by grouping. Okay, so remember, when you factor by grouping, you take the 4 terms, you make 2 smaller little subgroups of them. You find the greatest common factor of those 2 subgroups. Okay, so for this one, you can factor out 6x. And that will leave 3x plus 5. And for these 2, you can factor out a negative 5, which will leave you with 3x plus 5. And again, that equals 0. Now, since both of our binomials match, we factor that out to the front. So we have 3x plus 5, and we can go ahead and cross those out. And what's left goes into our next set of parentheses. So you have 6x minus 5 equals 0. Okay, so now, once we have it all factored, we set both to 0. Alright, so once we set both to 0, we have 3x plus 5 equals 0, or 6x minus 5 equals 0. Okay, so here, if we subtract 5 from both sides, that would give us 3x equals negative 5. So once we divide both sides by 3, we have x equals negative 5 over 3. Okay, now here, if we add 5 to both sides, we have 6x equals 5, and we divide both sides by 6, we have x equals 5 over 6. Okay, so that's the first step in actually solving our original problem. Okay, so we have to find 2 points that lie on the line of the graph, given that f of x is equal to 15. So what we do is, we plug in x equals negative 5 over 3, we'll get our y value, and that'll be 1 point. If we plug in x equals 5 over 6, we'll get another y value, and that'll be our second point. So those will be our 2 points. Okay, so we're going to plug into the original function. Actually, we're going to do that to both of them. Alright, since we're running out of space, we're going to continue that on the next page. So if you're still writing, please feel free to press pause and finish writing, but we're going to go ahead and move on. Alright. Okay, so if you remember, we have x equals negative 5 over 3, or x equals 5 over 6. And our original function, if f of x equals 18x squared plus 15x minus 10. Alright, so if we have x equals negative 5 over 3. f of negative 5 over 3 equals 18 times negative 5 over 3 squared plus 15 times negative 5 over 3 minus 10. Alright, so if we go ahead and simplify this, negative 5 over 3 squared is negative 5 over 3 times negative 5 over 3. So that becomes 18 times 25 over 9. Since negative times negative will be positive. Okay. So we can actually, since that's a positive times a negative, we can make that minus 15 times 5 over 3 minus 10. Okay, so now we can start to simplify each term. You can cancel out these two, so 9 goes into 9 once, 9 goes into 18 twice. Okay, 3 goes into 3 once, 3 goes into 15 5 times. Okay, so we have 2 times 25, which is 50. We have 5 times 5 divided by 1, which is 25, so it's minus 25 minus 10. 50 minus 25 is 25. 25 minus 10 is 15. Okay, so we know that f of negative 5 over 3, let's clean that up a little, equals 15, which gives us the point negative 5 over 3, 15. That's the first point on the graph. Okay. So now we just have to find the second point on the graph. So we go ahead and separate that. So again, we have x equals 5 over 6. So that gives us f of x. So, sorry about that, f of 5 over 6. F of 5 over 6 equals 18 times 5 over 6 squared plus 15 times 5 over 6 minus 10. Okay, so 5 over 6 squared is 5 over 6 times 5 over 6, so that's 18 times 25 over 36 plus 15 times 5 over 6 minus 10. So we can go ahead and simplify those terms. 18 and 36 can be canceled out because 18 goes into 18 once. 18 goes into 36 twice. Okay, and 6 and 15 can be simplified because 3 goes into 6 twice. And 3 goes into 15 5 times. So that gives us 25 divided by 2 plus 5 times 5 is 25, so we have 25 divided by 2 minus 10. Okay, now if we want to go ahead and do all of our subtracting, we have to get like denominators. So we know that 10 is equal to 20 divided by 2. So that's 25 divided by 2 plus 25 divided by 2 minus 20 divided by 2. 25 plus 25 is 50. 50 minus 20 is 30. That's going to be 30 divided by 2, which is 15. Okay, so we know that f of 5 over 6 also equals 15, pure coincidence. So our point would be 5 over 6, 15, which is our second point on the graph. Alright, so hopefully that made a little bit of sense. So, if you're still writing, please feel free to press pause. But we're going to go ahead to our next example. Alright. So, for our next example, we have the perimeter of the triangle pictured here is 58 feet. Okay, and we want to find the length of the sides. Okay. Now, what you want to remember is that the perimeter is just the sum of all the sides. Sum of the sides. So that means we're going to add all of these sides together. Okay, so you have x squared minus 2x plus x squared minus 2 plus x squared minus x equals 58. Because we know if we add them all together, it's going to equal 58. Alright, now since these are all positive, we really can just drop the parentheses. So we have x squared minus 2x plus x squared minus 2 plus x squared minus x equals 58. Okay, now if we want to solve this and we have a bunch of terms scattered, we want to combine all of our like terms. So we can combine this x squared and that x squared. So we have x squared plus x squared plus x squared. That gives us 3x squared. Okay, we even have the minus 2x and minus x. So that's minus 3x. Let me clean up that square a little bit. There we go. Right, and we just have the minus 2, so that minus 2 stays there, equals 58. Okay, so it's a little bit neater, but it's still not in the form of a quadratic, the standard form for a quadratic equation, because remember it has to equal 0. So we're going to subtract 58 from both sides. Well, that cancels out. So we have 3x squared minus 3x minus 2 minus 58 is minus 60 equals 0. Okay, now we could do the A times C method, which would definitely work. But if you notice, we can factor 3 out of each term. Alright, so if we did that, we would end up with 3 times x squared minus x minus 20 equals 0. Okay. So since we did not factor out a variable, all we did was factor out a numerical value, we can divide both sides by that numerical value. So we just divide both sides by 3. Those two cancel out. So we end up with x squared minus x minus 20 equals 0 divided by 3, which is just 0. And so that's a lot easier to solve. Alright, so we see here that b is equal to -1, c is equal to -20. Move that up a little bit. We have to find two numbers that multiply to equal your c. And those same two numbers add to equal your b. Okay. Now on this one, -5 and +4 works. -5 times 4 is -20. And -5 plus 4 is -1. So that means this will become x minus 5 times x plus 4. X minus 5 times x plus 4 equals 0. Okay, so again, we set both to 0. So we have x minus 5 equals 0, or x plus 4 equals 0. So if we add 5 to both sides, we end up with x equals 5. Or if we subtract 4 from both sides, we have x equals -4. Alright, so what we have to do now, since this, we're really just looking for the length of the sides, is we have to plug in those x values into each side. So plug into each side. And since we're running out of space, we're going to continue that on the next page. So if you are still writing, please feel free to press pause. But we're going to continue this on the next page. Alright, so remember, our triangle was x squared minus 2x, x squared minus 2, and x squared minus x. And we solve for x equals 5 and x equals -4. Okay, so for x equals 5, we have x squared minus 2x, which is really, once we replace x with 5, we have 5 squared minus 2 times 5. 5 squared is 25. 2 times 5 is 10, which is 15. Okay, so x squared minus 2. X squared minus 2. That's just 5 squared minus 2. Again, 5 squared is 25, so that's 25 minus 2, which is 23. Okay, now for x squared minus x, that's just 5 squared minus 5, which is 25 minus 5, which is 20. Okay, so these represent the length of the sides when x is equal to 5. Lengths when x equals 5. Alright, so what about when x is equal to -4? I'm glad you asked. When x is equal to -4, again, our x squared minus 2x. That's negative 4 squared minus 2 times negative 4. Okay, so negative 4 squared is positive 16, since it's negative 4 times negative 4. And negative 2 times negative 4 is positive 8, which is 24. Okay, now x squared minus 2, that's just negative 4 squared minus 2. Again, negative 4 squared is 16, so that's 16 minus 2, which is 14. Okay, now x squared minus x, that's just negative 4 squared minus negative 4. Negative 4 squared is 16. So we have 16 minus negative is plus 4, which is 20. Okay, so these are the lengths of the sides when x is equal to negative 4. Okay, so those are your lengths. Alright, so let's go on to the next example. If you're still writing, please feel free to press pause. Alright, so before we go to our next example, I'm going to do a quick reminder. Okay, so let's say we have the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, keep on going. Let's say we don't know what number to start with, so we just pick a value, let's say 2. Whatever value we start with, that's going to be our x, especially if we don't know what the value is. That's going to be our x. Now to move up to the next number, you just add 1. Okay. To move to the next number, again, you just add 1. So if you have 2 consecutive integers, we don't know what that first one is, so we'll call it x. Now remember, to move on to the next integer, you just add 1. Okay. Now if it was 3 consecutive integers, it would be x, x plus 1, x plus 2. Okay, and so forth and so on. Okay, what if we have, let's say, 56, 58, 60, 62, basically even integers. Okay. Again, let's say if we want to start at some value, we'll call it 56. Since we probably won't know what our first value is, we'll call that x. Now to move on to the next even integer, we'd have to add 2. Same thing, if we want to move on to that next even integer, we have to add 2. So if you were looking for 2 consecutive, clean that up, even integers, remember we're talking about even this time, then whatever your first one is would be x. But to get to the next even integer, it would be x plus 2. Because remember, wherever you start, to get to the next even integer, you'd have to add 2. Okay, so what if we have 105, 107, 109, 111, and etc., etc., and so on. Again, what if we pick some value we're going to start with, which is x? Okay. Again, notice these are all odd numbers, odd integers. So to get to the next odd integer, we just add 2 from where we started. Okay, and to get to the next one, we just add 2 more. So 2 consecutive odd integers is, once again, you're going to start at some value x, but to get to the next odd integer, it's going to be x plus 2. Now, if you had 3 consecutive odd integers, it would be x, x plus 2, x plus 4. Okay, same thing with even integers. It would be x, x plus 2, x plus 4 if you were looking for 3 consecutive even integers. Alright, so I just wanted to kind of let you brush up on that before we go to our next example. Alright, so for our next example, we have the product of 2 consecutive even integers is 224. Find the integers. Alright. Okay, now the first thing we want to look at is 2 consecutive even integers. Okay, now we know that they're represented by x and x plus 2. It would be the same thing if they were consecutive odd integers. It would still be x and x plus 2. And we know that the product is just a fancy way to say multiplication. So if we multiply these 2 consecutive even integers, we should get 224. So the product of those two, x times x plus 2, is 224. So if we distribute that x times x is x squared, so we have x squared, x times 2 is 2x, equals 224. Okay, so we can't solve it like this, so we'll go ahead and just subtract 224 from both sides, where that cancels out. So we have x squared plus 2x minus 224 equals 0. Okay, now that one we can solve. Okay, there's nothing in front of the x squared, so we can pretty much use the direct approach, where we know that b is equal to 2 and c is equal to negative 224. Okay, so we have to find 2 numbers that multiply to equal our c value, negative 224, and 2 numbers that add those same 2 numbers to equal our b value, which is 2. Okay, so after a little bit of trial and error, you will see that negative 14 and positive 16 works for both. So negative 14 times positive 16 is negative 224. And negative 14 plus positive 16 is 2. So that means this quadratic equation becomes x minus 14 times x plus 16 equals 0. Okay, so again, we just set both to 0. Okay, so we have x minus 14 equals 0, or x plus 16 equals 0. So if we add 14 to both sides, we get x equals positive 14. And if we subtract 16 from both sides, we get x equals negative 16. Okay, that's all fine and dandy, but notice they are not consecutive. One's positive, one's negative. So what we do is we just plug those into our x and x plus 2 to find our consecutive values. Okay, so when x equals 14, our x and x plus 2 become 14 and 14 plus 2. So that means we have 14 and 14 plus 2 is 16. Now what about when x is equal to negative 16? Okay, kind of separate that. When x equals negative 16, again, we're just looking for our x and our x plus 2. So x is negative 16, so that would give us negative 16 and negative 16 plus 2, which gives us negative 16 and negative 14 as possible solutions. Okay, so both of those represent your solutions. So you have negative 14 and negative 16, or 14 and 16, or negative 14 and negative 16. Either one of those sets of numbers will work. All right. Okay, so if you're still writing, feel free to press pause. We're going to go to our next example. All right. Okay, so the area of a rectangle is 84 square inches. Find its length and width. Okay, oh, I forgot to actually draw the rectangle. So this is the rectangle that was given with this problem. I forgot to draw it. We have x plus 3 and x minus 2. Okay, so we know that the area of this rectangle is 84 square inches. We want to find its length and width. Okay, so we know that area equals the length times the width. Okay, so they already told us the area. The area is 84 square inches. So we have 84 equals the length is x plus 3, and the width is x minus 2. Okay, so we're just basically plugging stuff in. So if we do the FOIL method here, we have x times x, which is x squared. We have your outer, which is minus 2x, and your inner, which is plus 3x. We combine those, we get plus x. And our last is negative 6 equals our area, which is 84. So I just kind of switched it around. Okay, now we can't factor this just yet because it's not equal to 0. So if we subtract 84 from both sides, we end up with x squared plus x minus 6 plus minus 84 is minus 90 equals 0. Alright, so now that it's equal to 0, now we can factor. So we find two numbers that multiply. Let me identify each value. So we know that b is equal to 1. And we know that c is equal to negative 90. Alright, so that means we have to find two numbers that multiply to equal your C. And those same two numbers add to equal your B. Okay, so in this case, we have 10 and negative 9. Because 10 times negative 9 is negative 90. And 10 plus negative 9 is positive 1. So this will become x plus 10 times x minus 9 equals 0. So again, we set both of those to 0. So we have x plus 10 equals 0. Or x minus 9 equals 0. Okay, so if we subtract 10 from both sides here, we have x equals negative 10. And if we add 9 to both sides here, we have x equals positive 9. Okay. Now, if we plug these in, if you plug in negative 10, you get a length of negative 7. And you can't have a negative length. But if you plug in 9, we know that x plus 3. So our x plus 3 becomes 9 plus 3. Which is 12. So that's our length. Now if you plug in x minus 2, so that would be 9 minus 2, which is 7, which is your width. Okay. Remember, if you plug in a value and you get a negative length or a negative width, you can't use that value because there are no negative length and width. Alright, so again, if you're still writing, feel free to press pause, but we're going to move on to our next example. Okay. So what if we have a stained glass window is shaped like a right triangle? The hypotenuse is 15 feet and the length of one leg is 3 more than the other. Find the length of the legs. Alright, so you just have to remember how your right triangle looks. So if you have a right triangle, oops, let me straighten that out. There we go. Good enough. If that's your right triangle, remember this is a leg, this is a leg, and this is your hypotenuse, which is directly across from your right angle. Okay, so that means if we have our right triangle here, and we have one leg is 3 more than the other, then this is one leg, and this leg will be x plus 3. And the hypotenuse is 15 feet. Okay, so we have 15. Okay, so we see here, this is 3 more than the other leg. Alright. Now also remember with a right triangle, you can use the Pythagorean theorem. Which is one leg squared plus the other leg squared equals the hypotenuse squared. Okay, so if we apply that, that means this leg squared plus the other leg squared equals the hypotenuse squared. Okay, so now first thing we have to do is kind of simplify all of that. Okay, so x plus 3 squared that's equal to x plus 3 times x plus 3. Okay, so that's x squared plus, once you use the FOIL method, you have x squared plus 3x plus 3x, so that's plus 6x plus 9. Okay, so that gives us x squared plus 6x plus 9 equals 15 squared is 225. Okay, so actually, since this is plus, we can just drop the parentheses. We have x squared plus 6x plus 9 equals 225. So you already know we can't solve it until it's simplified and in standard form. So we can do two things. We can first combine those two, and we can subtract 225 from both sides. Okay, so x squared plus x squared is 2x squared plus 6x minus, if you have 9 minus 225, that's minus 216 equals 0. Okay, now we have it in standard form. So if we wanted to, we could use the A times C method. But notice you can factor 2 out of each of those terms. So if you factor out a 2, that leaves x squared plus 3x minus 108 equals 0. Okay, now since we just factored out a 2, remember we can divide both sides by that numerical value. So that gives us x squared plus 3x minus 108 equals 0. Oops. Alright, so that means instead of the A times C method, we can use the direct method because B is equal to 3 and C is equal to negative 108. So we just have to find two numbers that multiply to equal your C. And those same two numbers add to equal your B. Okay, now after a little bit of trial and error, you will find that 12 and negative 9 works for both of them. 12 times negative 9 is negative 108, and 12 plus negative 9 is positive 3. Excuse me. So that means this will become x plus 12 times x minus 9 equals 0. Well, move this over a little bit since we're running out of space. So we have x plus 12 equals 0, or x minus 9 equals 0. Subtract 12 from both sides. X equals negative 12. Add 9 to both sides. You have x equals 9. Alright. Now the only problem is, if we plug in negative 12, we can't have a negative side. Okay, so that negative 12 disappears. But if we plug in 9, kind of give you an idea here. We're going to just redraw that. We already have our hypotenuse 15. Now when x is equal to 9, this side is just 9. Now when x is equal to 9 here, this side is 9 plus 3. So this side is 12. So we have 9, 12, and 15. And measure the length of your sides. Alright. Okay, so we'll do one more example. If you're still writing, again, feel free to press pause. Alright. Okay, so this example says Jill is going to launch a model rocket in her backyard. The function h of t is equal to negative 16t squared plus 32t models the height h represents the height of the rocket above the ground as a function of time t, where t represents time. Find the time that the rocket will be 16 feet above ground. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and solve this one. Okay, now notice they want to know when the height will be 16 feet. So the height will be 16 feet when h of t equals 16. Because remember, h represents the height of the rocket, and h of t is the height of the rocket at a certain time. So instead of h of t equals negative 16t squared plus 32t, we will actually have 16, because we're going to replace that h of t. 16 equals negative 16t squared plus 32t. Or we can switch it around. Negative 16t squared plus 32t equals 16. My little quirk is I feel better when my variables are on the left side. I have no idea why. Oh, actually, I could have left it that way because I want that to be positive, so I'm just going to add it to both sides. So actually, I could have left it that way. So because I want everything on one side and I want that t squared positive, I'm going to add 16t squared to both sides. And I'm on to also subtract 32t from both sides. Okay, so we have 16t squared. Uh-oh, making a lot of little errors here. 16t squared minus 32t. Remember, you still have that 16 plus 16 equals 0. Alright. So here we have our positive t squared value, and everything else is on one side, and it's in standard form. Okay. Now looking at this, we could use the a times c method. That would definitely give us the answer, but we need to have one doozy of a time following it. So you want to look carefully, because notice you can factor out 16 from each of those terms. Okay, so if you factor out a 16, that would leave you with t squared minus 2t plus 1 equals 0. And since you just factored out a numerical value and you didn't factor out a variable, you can just divide both sides by that numerical value, where those two 16s cancel each other out. So you end up with t squared minus 2t plus 1 equals 0 divided by anything, any non-zero value is just 0. Okay, so now we can go ahead and solve it without having to use the a times c method that we would have needed up here. So we know that b is equal to -2 and c is equal to 1. So we have to find two numbers that multiply to equal our c, and those same two numbers add to equal our b. Okay, so in this case, -1 and -1 works, because -1 times -1 is +1, and -1 plus -1 is -2. Okay, so now this, we know that that now factors into t minus 1 times t minus 1 equals 0. Okay. And honestly, since they're both the same, t minus 1 equals 0, we just set them both to 0. We only have to solve it once, since they're both the same thing. So we add 1 to both sides, we get t equals 1. Okay, so that lets us know that the rocket is 16 feet above ground 1 second after launch. Uh-oh. Hence your time is equal to 1 second. Alright, so I gave you a couple of story problems, hopefully as examples. Unfortunately, I can't predict every story problem you will run across, so I can't give you an example of every one you will see. But hopefully these helped a little bit, and I will see you on the next video.